it's Jess. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my September wrap up. Are you okay, sir? I don't know if you heard that, but that was my dog Echo. I'm actually filming this a couple days early, which is unfortunate because I don't get to finish off the last couple of books that I would like to for the month. But unfortunately, the video that was supposed to go up this week did not get finished. I'm still working on it, and in fact, this video is a day late. This past month, I have definitely enjoyed my reading, and overall, I'm very satisfied with the number of books that I've read, but they were not the actual books that I wanted to read. I've been having a lot of focusing issues. Life has just been really chaotic, really busy. I just cannot focus on the books that I'm reading. So I end up putting them down and reading fluff and popcorn, which is fine, but it is delaying my videos. Okay, you know what? This is a rant. Nobody cares about this. Let's just get into the books that I read this month. First up, I'm going to talk about the book that my book club and I read together. That is Foundricide by Robert Jackson Bennett. This book is a huge win for me, especially if you've been here for a while and you know that the last 3 books that we read together as a book club were not really my favorites. This is the first book in an adult fantasy trilogy, and I gave this book 4 stars. I think it is excellent. It is so fun. This is a series that follows Sansia, and she is a thief. She has an ability that when she touches things, she can perceive certain things about what she is touching. So for example, if she's trying to pick a lock, she can touch the lock and the lock will help her pick it. So as you can imagine, her ability comes in really useful as a thief. And then one day she is hired to steal an object, and she does it. But once she has a hold of the object, she realizes that it would be potentially apocalyptic if certain people got their hands on this object. And so she's like, maybe I should keep this and not end the world. So, props to her for not burning the entire world down. But obviously, when she decides that she's not going to give the object to the people that paid her to steal it, a lot of shit goes really wrong really fast. I really recommend this book, especially if you are a plot reader. This book, the plot is absolutely first and foremost. You start and you just go the whole time. It is just action. The plot is moving forward, reveals are happening, and things just keep getting worse all the way into the very last chapter. Things just keep going wrong. Sansia kind of makes this group of friends. She has a lot of trust issues, so it's hard for her to really connect with people, especially because due to her abilities she can't touch people. But she's kind of thrown into this ragtag group and forced to trust them so that they can help her prevent the world from burning down to ashes around them. The stakes are really high in here, and this definitely has a lot of characters just like doing the best they can and making the choices that they can when like neither choice is really a good choice. It's just like bad or worse, you know? Another thing that I really, really liked about this is the magic system is really, really cool. The magic system in this book is called scribing, and basically you use magic sigils on objects to convince the object that the reality is different than like their perceived reality. So like you could convince a cart that it was actually on a hill, and then like the cart would move on its own so that like you don't need a horse or like a person to pull the cart. Basically just using these sigils to like break the laws of reality. It's super, super cool. I don't really have too many criticisms for this book. Overall, I think it's really, really excellent. But I did want to mention that one of the things that kind of pulled me out of reality with this book is just that like Sansia and this like ragtag group, which like I like them. I really, really like the characters. I like the interactions that they have. However, it was a little bit difficult for me to get on board with Sansia just like being okay trusting them. I fully expected her to just like dip out and like leave and be like, this is somebody else's problem based off of the character that she is. Obviously, like she couldn't do that because she's the main character, and then there would literally be no plot because like they need her and her abilities. And given what has happened in her past, I don't know that like her personality could have been made different, but it was a little bit unbelievable that she trusted some of the other characters with the information that she trusted them with. I didn't necessarily like fully buy that, but like in the grand scheme of things, that's really, really not a big deal. And then like the only other criticism I have is that this book does have like a little bit of commentary on privilege and classism. And I think like for the most part, it does a really, really good job of that, especially when you consider like the character Gregor and Sansia and like how different they are, but like also how similar they are, and how like Gregor comes from a position of privilege and Sansia calls him out on that. And, you know, like they talk about how that impacts their daily life and like the choices that they have and how they're able to survive. And so overall, I really, really liked that. But there definitely were a couple of moments where I was like, okay, this is a little heavy-handed. And this is coming from someone who generally like doesn't care if the overall book messaging is a little heavy-handed. I mean, don't get me wrong. I appreciate subtlety and nuance, but I don't usually like care. Like it doesn't usually bug me if the ethical conversation is heavy-handed, but it definitely was like extra in this book, and I was like, okay, chill out a little bit there. Like, I already get the point. You don't have to hit me in the face with it. Again, that's such like a minor criticism. It doesn't really matter. And so overall, like I said, I gave this book 4 stars. I really recommend it. It's a really, really fun time if you like action heavy fantasy where like the plot is very important. And honestly, like I cannot wait to pick up book 2. I think it is fantastic. Next up, I finally finished City of Heavenly Fire. This is book 6 in the Mortal Instruments by Cassandra Clare. I started this book in like February. Oh my god. It's been so long. And I have just been like kind of chipping away at it little by little because like it is such a long book. I am so happy to finally have finished The Mortal Instruments. Every single time I see somebody reading Cassandra Clare, I get such FOMO because As you can tell based off of this, I am not up to date on her novels. Her novels are so popular, like that whenever a new one comes out, I just get inundated with so many people reading it, and I just get the biggest FOMO. So I'm so happy that I finally finished The Mortal Instruments. I honestly cannot tell you anything about this book specifically because it is like the sixth book in the series. But basically, The Mortal Instruments is an urban fantasy, and most of it, I would say, takes place in New York City. Basically, the main character, Clary, she thinks she's a normal human girl, but then, surprise, surprise, it turns out that she's actually part angel and she has magical abilities. And it turns out like she's supposed to fight and kill demons and like send them back to the demon world. And yeah, I mean, honestly, it's really hard at this point to explain the Shadowhunter world because there's so many books in it, and I feel like everybody already knows at this point. Overall, I would say this book is fun. There's something about Cassandra Clare's writing that is pretty easy, like it's just popcorn. You just consume it and you move through the book really, really fast. Overall, this was like fairly entertaining, but I will say that like I definitely think that this should have been edited. There were a lot of sections where I was like, just cut this out, it's boring, like just get to the next part. That definitely did hinder my enjoyment of it. And I know that like moving forward with Cassandra Clare's works, that like that is only gonna get worse, that like her books have less and less editing as they go. That is part of like a whole other conversation about the state of literature that I don't have time for in this video. I think this is a fun series. It's entertaining, it's popcorn, it's addictive to read, but I don't necessarily recommend this series. I think like if you're interested in it, go for it, but like I'm probably not gonna necessarily like push this book series on anybody if they ask me for a recommendation. But that being said, I am going to continue working my way through Cassandra Clare's backlist, and like I said, it is entertaining and fun. So I had a good time. I gave it 3 stars. I just, think that there are better books out there. Sorry, I don't know if that sounds mean, but like that's just how I feel. The next 2 books I'm gonna be pretty quick with because I have an entire vlog dedicated to these 2 books. They're the books that I read for my BookTube Knockout series where I was reading like Olivia. The first is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This is a young adult mystery where you follow Pip, who is using her senior capstone project as a sneaky front so that she can investigate a murder that happened 5 years ago where she thinks like the wrong person is accused, and everybody in town is convinced that like this person did it, but Pip doesn't think they did, and so she goes about investigating that. This book is great. I highly recommend this if you like murder mysteries, especially if you are like a young adult, if you are in the age range. I think it's so fantastic. Pip is so perceptive and intelligent and at the same time like kind of silly. Pip is such an interesting and compelling main character. You really feel like she comes alive on the page. I loved reading about her. I also think the mystery is really well crafted, and I think Holly Jackson does a great job of providing just enough clues that the reader can figure out like half of what's happening, but then at the same time you're still gonna be shocked when like all the final reveals come in. So overall, it's great. 4 stars. I really recommend this. I had an absolute blast reading this. And then the second book that I read for that vlog is The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. This is an adult horror novel, and I ended up giving this 3 stars. This was originally pitched to me as like a haunted house story, and when you get down to this book thematically, it is a haunted house story. However, I do not recommend this if you are looking for a haunted house story, because the way that this house is haunted is not what you're looking for if you're looking for a haunted house story. And that's as much as I can say about it. This book is very, very difficult to talk about without spoiling it. And at its core, this is a book about survival and how we as humans cope with certain things. I think that honestly is as much as I can say about this book. I'm really sorry I can't be more specific. Honestly, my main criticism with this is that I just think it needed more time to cook. I think that the story being told in this book is very important, but I think it requires a lot of empathy and a lot of sensitivity and a just metric shit ton of nuance. I think that this story being told within the horror genre is very appropriate. I genuinely don't know how you would go about telling this story. I just think that this didn't hit the mark. And I am not the right reviewer for this book, and I want to make it clear about that. So I don't necessarily know that my opinion is even valid about this, but I will say that I don't think it was offensive. I just think that it didn't go where it needed to go. But yeah, that ultimately sums up why I gave it 3 stars, and I think it's fine. Okay, so I mentioned at the start of this video that this reading month did not go according to plan, and I have been having just so much focusing issues. My brain is so foggy. My life is so busy and chaotic, and like I can't focus. Like there's times when I'll be talking to someone and my brain just shuts off in the middle of a sentence, and like I just completely forget what I'm gonna say. I can already tell editing this video is gonna be a pain in the butt because I've trailed off already so many times. I didn't get to finish a lot of the books that I wanted to this month, but I did want to keep reading because I love reading. So I read 4 more books, and they are all popcorn and fluff. So first up, I read Six Scorched Roses by Carissa Broadbent. This is the novella that you read in between books 1 and 2 of the Nightborn duet, which is the first duet of 3 in like an overall 6-book series. This is a novella that follows Lilith, and she is desperate to find a cure for her sister who is very, very sick. So in an effort to do that, she makes a deal with a vampire that he will trade her for his blood, and she's hoping that like she can use the blood to find a cure because like vampire blood has a lot of restorative properties to it. That's the premise of this book. Like I don't need to go too much into the plot. Like it's so short. I read this in one sitting, and overall I gave it 3 stars. It was really fun. It was entertaining, but I think like there's just not a lot here. You know, like it's fine. I mean, I think if you like the series, then definitely read this and like read it where you're supposed to within the series. But I don't necessarily recommend this if you're not already going to read the series. You know, this is what it is, but There's not a lot here. There's not a lot of substance. And I do think like the other books in this series are so much stronger. But I mean, it's still fun. It's like not even 200 pages, but it's a good time. After I finished that fantasy romance novella, I picked up a book series, and I feel like I need a little bit of a backstory. So I was on Instagram, and most of the posts that I see on Instagram are about books. I'm pretty sure romance is like the most popular genre of book read. So even though I don't necessarily read predominantly romance, a significant portion of the book posts that I see are about romance books. And I came across a reel, and it was like, these are my favorite why choose romances. And I was like, okay, I'm listening. And I know that this is partially because of the algorithm, but I watched that, and because I interacted with it, then I kept seeing the same book series get recommended to me, and I just couldn't focus on anything. And I was like, okay, like, let me just see, maybe I'll like this, maybe it will be something that like I can actually sit down and read and focus on. And you know what? It worked, because I read the entire trilogy. That is how I read my first dark romance series. I think it's called like The Lords of Forsyth University. I'm not sure. The first one is like The Lord of Pain or something like that. I don't know. Like, the covers will be on the screen so like you can see all of them. And like the covers pretty much sum up the vibe of the book. They are dark romances, and they are bully romances. And this is not something that I would like normally seek out. And after reading this series, I don't necessarily know that I really am into dark romance. I have not like closed myself off to the genre, but I don't think that I will like actively seek it out. I just don't know if it's for me, but I will say that I think that this series was actually really well written. It's hard for me to rate each book individually because like I just read through the entire series. So overall, I'm actually giving the series 3.5 stars. So this series is set in a world where there are kind of like these crime lords, and they have divided up this town, and there are 5 of them, and like each one of these like underground crime lords runs like a certain section of the city. These men kind of use the fraternity system at this college, Forsyth University, as a sort of like training slash like vetting process. I don't know, like it's really, really weird. It's really weird. Like the premise of this series is just absolutely bonkers. Like it's so stupid. And you just gotta like be like, that's the premise, okay, and just kind of like accept it and move on, because it's straight up never gonna make sense. Like it's never gonna make sense. Like, why are these grown-ass men so invested in college fraternities? And like it's where like they send their sons, and so like I get that, but like why are they invested in like the fraternities overall, and like this weird game that like the fraternities like play against each other, like accumulating points? And it gets weirder. It gets even weirder, because the premise of this series is that in each fraternity there are 3 like leaders of the fraternity, and it depends on which fraternity it is, but the one that you follow in this series is whatever, I don't even remember the name of the fraternity, but the 3 leaders are called lords. And at the start of the school year, they hire, sort of, a lady. And the lady is basically there on contract to be their girlfriend. You know, she helps host parties. She helps with like the fraternities, charity events and stuff like that. But like, also, you know, she is expected to do all of the other things that are involved with being a girlfriend. And this is a dark romance and it is a bully romance. So you can see where I'm going with this. This is definitely a book that plays into very specific kinks. And if you want to read this series, you need to read the trigger warnings for it because it's playing into very specific kinks. And if you don't like that, you shouldn't read the series. The original reason that I picked it up is because like I definitely was interested in trying out a Why Choose romance, which if you don't know, a Why Choose romance is usually like one girl and then like multiple men. And this series, it's 3 men. I don't know what like the norms are within this like subgenre in romance. It's not always like dark or bully. Honestly, I did like it. If you know of good Why Choose romances, like honestly recommend them. I do think that it is fun, especially because like I am an extremely monogamous person. There's just something appealing about reading this type of a romance novel where it's just like escapism, because that is something that like I will never be a part of, because I do not want to have multiple partners for myself. Like I am not interested in that. Overall, I think that this series is like really, really well put together. I think it was really well written, and I did actually really like the characters. I mean, obviously, this is definitely a case where like everyone sucks here, you know what I'm saying? Like this is a bully romance, like they're not good people, but I think coming from the point of view of someone who has never read a bully romance before, I think that in order to get like the reader invested in this type of a romance, you have to make it believable that the individual in the relationship that was being bullied can like either forgive or move past somehow what was happening to them. And in this case, it is extreme. It is very dark and very extreme. But I think that the authors did a really good job making it believable, because the main character kind of like sticks it to him a little bit. Like she kind of gets revenge back and like fucks with them in very real ways that have like real, very serious repercussions. And so is this relationship very, very toxic at the beginning of the series? Oh, like 100%. It is the most toxic relationship that I have ever read in a book at like the start of the series. Like things do change as the series goes along, but the book at no point like pretends that it's not toxic. I don't think the book ever tries to like glamorize this. It's just like playing to very specific kinks that people have, and you know, this is the story that comes out of that. Because of the way it's written and because of the like character progression, I don't want to call it character growth because like it's kind of a little bit of regression to be honest, but because of the way the characters like change, I do think the relationship was like really believable. And even though it is like a toxic, absolute disgusting mess, I did find myself liking the characters despite that. And I do think that that is like a credit to the authors and like how well they wrote it. Now, I will say that I did give this series a 3.5, and honestly, I think it comes down to like a couple things. First of all, you have to suspend so much belief to read this series. Like there's so many things where you're just like, this doesn't make sense. On one hand, you have to like meet the book at the level that the book is at. And I don't think the authors ever were trying to make this like realistic in any way. Like they are well aware that this is like a batshit premise, but that doesn't stop it from like pulling you out of the story when you're reading it, when you're like, oh my God, this would never happen. Oh my God, this would never happen. Oh my God, this doesn't make any sense. If you want to read this series, I think just like know that going into it, you're just gonna see shit and you're just gonna have to be like, okay, I accept it, we're moving on, because like it's not gonna make sense and it's also not really gonna be explained. So it just is what it is. And then my other major criticism about the book is kind of like the same criticism, but like two different parts of it, is that there's a lot of stuff that I would have actually liked to see happen on page that like you kind of only like sort of learn about after it's over. And I'm not talking about like sex scenes and smut, things like that. I'm talking about like what some of like the three male main characters do, some of the things that like they do just like happens off screen, and I'm like, okay, but like I would have liked to be there for that action. The plot, by the way, is like mid. Like it is good enough to move the book along, and it is very, very, very entertaining. Like I said, this whole series is popcorn, just pure entertainment. But I don't necessarily think that it is like the best crafted plot I've ever encountered by any means. And like, I don't think the authors are pretending it is either. Like the authors very much know what they have going on. Like they know what they've written. But then the other thing that like never really gets explained is that like all of the fraternities on campus, there are 5 of them, are in this like competition called The Game, and all of the main characters are involved in it, and the game itself is never really explained, and I kind of wish they would have explained it. I think it would have made it like a lot more interesting and compelling. I think it would have added a lot to the plot. Genuinely, if they would have actually explained the rules of the game and given more scenes involving that and like the competition between the fraternities and stuff, I genuinely think that the series could have been a 4-star series. And then the only other thing that I wanted to talk about this series is that it is dirty. Now, again, this is a choice that the authors made. This is not me criticizing the series, but I did want to just say, like, it is very, very spicy, and you need to check the content and trigger warnings for it, because some of it plays into some very dark kinks, and you need to be okay with that if you're gonna read this. But beyond that, a lot of the smut in this is like very crass, and like it's intentional. I think like they're really playing up like the darkness of the dark romance, but like they definitely use like very crass words and like very explicit words when describing the smut. Some of them I was like, ew, why would you choose that word? But like I don't necessarily criticize the book for it, because like again, it is just like the choice that they made to like lean into the dark romance tropes. But like I was like, ew, I don't like that word choice. It is a bad word choice. So I did just want to mention that it is quite crass. So yeah, that is my first foray into dark romance. Like I said, I'm not completely closed off to the genre, but I don't think that I'm going to like seek out any more dark romance. I definitely like fantasy romance better than contemporary romance, just like flat out. But I will say that I might actually continue on with these authors' works. So this first trilogy follows like the lords, who are like the leaders of one fraternity, and then there's like a second trilogy, and I think they're gonna continue and do like a trilogy for each of the 5 fraternities. But there's already a second like finished trilogy out that follows a different fraternity, and it is also Why Choose and also dark romance, and it is like one female protagonist, three men. So I honestly might read that because these books were like very entertaining, and I'm still having a lot of trouble focusing, so might as well, right? Okay, there you go. Those are all the books that I read in September. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I really, really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. I hope that you stay safe this week, and I will see you all in October for lots and lots of spooky books and spooky vlogs. So, goodbye!